Welcome to Scribbler to Scribe. I'm your host, David Scribbler Wishart, and I'm joined by my co-host, resident scribe, Pastor Ronnie Smith from Peace Lutheran Church. We invite you on a spiritual journey to explore questions of faith in the human experience. If you're searching for more meaning in your life, you're not alone. So join us as we search for wisdom and personal growth through a theological lens.
So that actually dovetails into another question I have here, which is like about forming lasting relationships. So I think that fear can be something that gets in the way of people connecting with other people. Now, what does that fear mean? It's like, well, what am I afraid of? Why am I afraid of maybe bearing my soul to somebody and getting close? But I have this real perception in the world that, and maybe this pandemic's actually helped lessen that, but certainly before it, and in the the political climate, it's maybe changed a little too. But it was a very like antagonistic environment, and I sense that there's a lot of people who feel very frustrated and very lonely in all of that. That loneliness manifests in the form of anger, where people find something that they can lash out against and maybe retreat into some kind of tribal like group to feel connected to something, but they're not meaningful interpersonal close connections. They're sort of only valuable until you're not valuable to them anymore, and they don't have like any long-term sustenance or substance to them.
Right.
But that's a question for you, is what is in the way of people forming lasting relationships, and what does the Bible have to say about friendship or relationships in general?
I missed your last Bible reference question, though. I guess talked about control. There's a story about the Tower of Babel, or Babel, however you want to pronounce it, and it's basically humans tried to create this glorious monument of their own amazingness, and God causes the tower to fall. And it's like, I think you've heard something along the lines like when people make great plans, God laughs, or something like that. But God is always correcting us, I guess, because Old Testament in particular is like, God gives us a chance, we get it wrong. God gives us a chance, we get it wrong. Over and over again, that is a pattern. But moving on to the second question here, was in the way of lasting relationships? Well, I guess one of the more primal fears is fear of losing something. So people are reluctant to enter into a fragile human emotional experience if they don't think it's going to last or something like that. There's one sort of barrier at times. But also in the past, before COVID too, many of us, most of us were sort of head down onward with our own lives. And we started getting really good at that, I guess, just focusing on ourselves. Communities disintegrating, families disintegrating. But now, back to this care piece, we've all been forced to care much more about the people around us in everyday life than we did before. Now there's this shared experience, shared trauma, I guess, that we've all gone through. And there's a lot of unifying power in having gone through the same ordeal, I guess. And obviously some have weathered it much better than others. And it's not meant to belittle or take away from the suffering, but another pattern in the Bible too is this suffering and redemption over and over again also.
So you said there, for people in entering relationships is fear of losing something, right? And so that implies that there's a lack of confidence in themselves, that whatever the person they love is going to leave them, because they'll find out that, I'm not worthy of being loved.
Right. That's a really good. Oh, sorry.
Well, and so I just was going to say, I mean, the extension of that is, well, that's a falsehood, because, one thing that's certain is that, well, God will always love you, so you're always loved there, right? And so that means that, you are worthy of it, forming a relationship with somebody. Right. But if we don't have God in our life, how can we ever feel that? And then the floor kind of gets pulled out from under us.
Well, even if we deny God's existence, God still is the substance of everything. But great point on your part there with that other reason. Another one is that people don't know how to have those kinds of relationships, because we've been seeing a lot of family breakdowns over the past few generations in particular. And, a lot of kids growing up without parents, or in many cases, less than adequate parents and what have you, a lot of tragedy. But then just straight up a ton of divorce too, right? Just families breaking apart. And so people grow up without the emotional toolkit, I guess, to later in life have those meaningful relationships in many cases. That's not a be all end all either. People still overcome those things. But this is another link to COVID, where I think families have been real winners in many cases, because families are just spending a lot more time together now, which we haven't seen in many, many decades, probably, that level of family strength, I guess, society-wide. Not that there haven't been problems in other periods and there's no idealized past, but certainly a trend we've seen over the last few decades, 30, 40 years.
You think about, just use my example with my son. So I, before all this, would leave the house at 7 a.m., catch the train. He'd still be in bed, and I wouldn't get home until after 6 p.m. And I'd see him from about 6:15 to 8:30. So I get, let's say 2 hours and a little bit per weekday with him. So in a given week, I'm getting like 10 hours, maybe a little longer on Fridays. So let's say 12, just to round it off. But now I'm seeing him in the morning, right, when he gets up for, an hour, 15 minutes. And then, he gets home from school, like he plays a bit with friends after school. And so he's staying home at 4:30. I'm upstairs, but I come down around 5. We do supper and everything. So, and then from say 5 until 8:30, right? So 3.5 hours, another hour in the front. So let's say 4.5 hours a day. So that's over double from before, right? So this environment. So that has to mean something, right? Like that has to change the dynamic. And you hear it a lot with some of like the senior executives and stuff at the bank who work these obscene hours and stuff like that, who are now at home, and they've just spent way more time with their kids than they ever would have. Yeah. And, I think that's really important. I think it's important to have family dinners together and, be able to do these things. It also probably changes a lot of the kind of dynamics between partners, where, one person before would get stuck with an unhealthy balance of like housework if they just happen to be the one who gets home sooner, or trying to juggle a job and that, and then the other person's just got these long hours stuff, so they're never really available. And it can create an environment where a lot of resent tends to set in.
Right.
So I do feel like, this situation's helped a lot with sort of rebalancing a lot of that stuff out.
Right.
And it's just that word balance, I've found, has been very important. And if things become unbalanced in any way in your life, it tends to just be, that's when you hear about it, right? And things just start to go wrong. And if things start going wrong, it means balance is missing somewhere. And you have to take a step back and find out, okay, what do I need to do to level the scales back out? Right. And take a pause and think about that.
Well, you're a good example of what we were talking about earlier. I dare say you're a much more empathetic person than you were a year ago, strictly from the fact that you spent more time with your kid. That's going to make you more empathetic, less self-centered. Tend to look at the future differently, all kinds of ramifications of just time spent. There's no substitute for time spent, and it's beyond price, of course, and especially when they're small, right? I mean, you never get that time back.
Yeah, when all they want to do is spend time with you and you're actually available to do it, that's a big deal. They become a teenager or something, and he's going to be a lot less interested in that. So I do feel like this is a pretty good sweet spot, where if this was going to happen at a certain age, I'm glad it's 6. I feel like that's worked out fairly well.
So there we go, solving the world's problems just like that.
What are we saying? Need more pandemics? I don't know about that, but
we need stronger families.
Definitely, yeah. And my parents, I'm not a child of divorce, so I don't have that experience in my past. They had some moments during their marriage where it got close, like it wasn't great at one point. But they worked through that, and I'm thankful that they did. And I think that that takes just a lot of just to let go of your ego in a lot of those situations. And I think, with me and my wife, we don't always agree on stuff, but I just don't see a lot of the value in getting into these explosive fights about things and clinging to your beliefs and getting defensive and just hanging on to stuff. It just seems like what outcome is it? You want to win? You're never winning, right? In those situations, everybody loses when you start thinking that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I think that's really important. So you got to be a role model for good families, and you help your kids see that, and then they do the same, and it transcends the generations.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always people maybe don't realize this, but being a pastor, what's the role of a pastor? A big part of that for me is being a good father and a good husband, and that's my number one job, I guess. It's my number one ministry, is to put all the love that I have into these little children and help them grow. Mm-hmm. There's no greater ministry that I could do, I guess. And that's every day, all day. It's the very best thing in the whole world, but it's also the hardest thing in the whole world. Anybody could be a shitty parent, I guess. but you really got to dig in if you want to be on the positive side.
What you know, in the Bible, like as far as I know, you don't see children that much in the stories. Maybe I'm wrong, but is that intentional, or what does Jesus have to say about that?
Well, he has to say, let the children come to me. Anyone who'd put a stumbling block before one such as these would be better off, I think, to like tie a millstone and around their neck and jump in the lake or something like that. It's a bit extreme, but
Okay.
but let the children come to me. Heaven belongs to such as these. And kids teach us so much all the time. They're actually the greatest teachers about God. Like, just observe children if you want to know about God, more about God.
Mm-hmm.
Not when they're like picking a fight, I guess, but they really come up with some startling theological statements if you're paying attention enough.
Well,
but they used for forever and a day, children were better seen and not heard, right? So that's a long-standing view, certainly more extreme in ancient times, I guess. A lot of kids just straight up didn't survive. So it wasn't really until you could prove you're going to hang on a little bit, I guess, that maybe your value increased. But people always loved children. It's not like people were so heartless about it. We could never say that. They were just as human as us.
Yes. Well, so
but from a society perspective, in terms of assigning worth and value, obviously they were lower on the totem pole.
Sure. You made an interesting point. So I'm going to try to link it to something. If kids can say the sort of most interesting sort of theological statements, whether they realize it or not, I think one of the universal truths about children is innocence. So they come from a place of innocence. And is there a linkage in that to God and to spirituality and everything? Like, do you think that's why children have that these things they say that just can be kind of profound in their own little way and make you have to take a step back and think and reflect? Or is it something else?
I think that's certainly a big part of it. Another part of it is that I think is very prominent is they lack deceit in some kind of way. They're not out to, they may make mistakes and do shitty things, but they're not out to get you, kind of thing.
Right.
But their motivations are more pure, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And they don't have all the filters that we develop as adults, like, oh, can't say this, can't behave this way, and so on and so forth. But we lose that sort of childlike sort of sense of awe and wonder about the world, especially when we're trying to control everything, as you talked about earlier. When you practice not control, I guess, try to find that sense of awe and wonder about the things around you, like step back from yourself in a sense.
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to trying to tap back into some of the childlike energy and that sort of statement, young at heart, right? Like to really embody that, because it's so easy as time goes by to let it kind of beat you down and make you cynical and distrustful and so many other things. And you talk about deceit, and it's just like, well, the world's trying to mold you in a way, and so you kind of twist and turn into the knots that it's pushing you, and it's takes a lot of work to fight back against that. And I think that if you don't give children the tools to understand themselves and their place in the world, and give them the confidence they need to forge ahead, they get molded by it. And I think a lot of that confidence that they develop comes from good families. That strong base builds confidence. You feel like you have worth. And once you feel that way, you can, you don't let those things defeat you later. And I think that helps you remain more in a growth-oriented mindset. You feel more young and you feel like you can learn, and there's a little bit more awe in the world because you become more comfortable with, there's things I don't know. I'm always open to learn, and it's not going to hurt me. Like, it's not going to affect me. I'm going to be here one way or another. Yeah, I think, I didn't think that the conversation would go this way when we started out tonight, but I do feel like, the 2020, like the pandemic's really, made us appreciate how important family is. And your family is not just, your flesh and blood family under your house, but just the importance of your extended family. Like, we have a good friend who, she's like family for us. And, she's closer with me and my wife than she would be probably with her own family if you asked her. And that's just how we like it. Like, it's just, this is, we want to keep our doors open to people like that, and make them feel like, I like these friendships that we voluntarily enter into. I think they're super important. And all the, products you can order off online and everything are no substitute for what you feel when you have friends.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big thing people are missing right now. Just to tie those couple of things together, once you begin to practice that, not control, this sense of awe and wonder, this childlike sort of perception, perhaps. I don't know. It's not childish, but childlike.
Mm-hmm.
People confuse those a lot of times. But once you get in the practice of being able to carve that out in your own life, then the responsibility becomes, how do you hold that space for the people around you? How do you let them be like that? And how do you infect them with your presence that way?
Yeah. So I was talking about, you taking that energy that, you can exude, like injecting it into the world and creating a space where you create that kind of like positive energy around you. And I don't think it's something that I'm very good at. I have to work on it. But one thing I've noticed is there's some people out there who can go like up to the grocery counter and they'll just strike up conversation with the cashier, or they just naturally, like, how are you turns into a lot more than that, right? And things just like light up, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, I feel like I'm saying the same words as these other people and I'm getting nothing back, right? Like, it's just real, meh. And it just is a transaction, and it doesn't turn into anything. And so I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me? And I'm like, what's going on here? And I don't. So it's fascinating how some people are able to carry that energy around them and others don't. And it's easy to just get into the frame of mind that, it's something wrong with the other person. And it's not anything wrong with you either, but it's just, you should look at it as an opportunity. Like, what are they doing differently than I'm doing? Because, how do I learn from this? And I don't know what the answer is to that. It's just a statement, but it's something I've noticed.
Yeah, well, I think some people are, quick with a word compared to others.
Yeah.
One trick that I use, I guess, it's a lot of it comes down to just observation. Like, most of the time, it's just observing something about them and making a comment on it.
Right.
And then that sort of frees them up to sort of respond, I guess, enter into the space that we've created.
Right.
But children are a really good example too, because they don't hate naturally. They get taught to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that their essence is more of, a loving place.
Yep, definitely.
Kids can of all different colors can play, no problem. It's only when they're told not to and that it's wrong that they become like that.
Yep.
So Jesus invites us to remain childlike and not childish.
Mm-hmm.
We hope you found your time nourishing and life-giving. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. If you would like to hear more and support the podcast and Peace Lutheran Church, please consider donating at the link in the description. For DW, I'm Pastor Ronnie Smith. Peace be with you.